Welcome back, and you're watching Daybreak. Thanks for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Ahmed Hashi is governance and diplomatic commentator. Churchill Ogut is an economist with the IC Group. Meshak Odede is international affairs commentator. And this morning we are discussing the spillover effects of the Trump administration tariffs and its second coming in Washington, and how this has caused global tension and the markets around the world. Churchill, to you. One of the accusations that was laid at the doorstep of President Kenyatta was looking east. And this was to China. Yesterday, you had the former budget committee chair, Ndindi Nyoro, talking about the failure and the inability by Kenya's leadership to end the begging bowl culture. How do we even fix a small issue that pertains even our own budget-making process to fix our finances?
One thing, Ayub, I can tell you is we can't run away from financing the budget. Simple because our expenditure far outpaces the revenue that we can collect. And that's the reality. Unless now we reach a point whereby we are able now to match the spending to the revenues that we are able to collect organically, that is when we can now stop the borrowing that it is. But that as it may be, the kind of borrowing, to your question around pivoting to the east, and it all boils down to the genesis to that China being ascending to the World Trade Organization in 2002, 2003, and then it increased its trade with other countries, Kenya being one of them. So at some point, it was just natural that China would now start even extending lending financing to these countries, and also mirroring the Belt and Road Initiative that it is. So by the time that we were borrowing from China, Kenya wasn't even isolation. A number of countries, even in Africa, were now borrowing from China. So it was just that period, the time that now China has extended trade, has expanded trade on the continent, and also its forays with the Belt and Road Initiatives and all these programs. So that was the natural outcome of that now pivoting to East. So we won't entirely blame Uhuru administration for that. It's just that now, if we look at the kind of borrowing that we got, yes, this big project that we got from China, if you look at the kind of return on investments from the capital expenditure, should be right about 10%. But if you look at now this particular project, the SGR, we are not able to make 10% out of in any given year. So that has been the mismatch that, yes, we are getting these big projects fully funded, sorted by China in a short period of time, which is different from other kind of financing. If you go to the multilateral lenders, you find that there are projects but are done within multi-years, like now the short period of time that we get from China. So I think that's just to put into context the pivot to the east.
And Meshak, does the moment present the Chinese and Xi Jinping with the opportunity to woo the victims of Donald Trump's tariffs?
Yes, it is true. The moment present them with that opportunity, because if you look at African countries now and the kind of relationship, bilateral or otherwise, they have with China, even the common mwananchi will understand that when you look around, you will see the expressway, you will see the thicker superhighway and all those kind of infrastructure. But when you go to the West, most of the time you will find a lot of money put on behavior change, because you can't really point out, even here in Nairobi, what a huge thing that was done to us by any Western country that remains something we all look at and marvel and say, this is good for our country. If you look at the roads, most of the time you will find they were done by the bilateral agreement between China and Kenya. But you can't see, the only thing I see is the National Archives of the days before we were independent and things like that. So I think if the whole thing is pushed a little bit further, it will leave most of the African countries with no choice than to just go fully and work with partners in the East who gives the current generation something they talk of. Because when I travel outside the country and I see the roads, I quickly can only compare those roads with our expressway and a few of those interchanges that we have, the bypasses that we have. But before that, I don't know one road that I would put to the western part of the world and say this one was done between agreement of Kenya and any country in the West. So if things go the way they are, I think the younger generation, because right now it is not even fashionable in those big meetings when you keep telling us about behavior change or capacity building, and that is where I know most of the Western countries have put a lot of their money on. I don't know how far they are going to build our capacity. China is not building our capacity, but we can see Thika Road, and I used it this morning, and for me that is great.
Okay, Ahmed, Vladimir Putin and Russia is planning to dethrone the dollar as the dominant world trading currency. And when the last BRICS meeting happened in Johannesburg in South Africa, they expanded from 5 to 10 members. But there's an interesting observation here. And is it strategic or otherwise being cheeky by President William Ruto that in the two instances where the BRICS had convened a summit, one in Johannesburg, he sent Dr. Alfred Mutoz, then the Foreign Affairs CS. And then when Putin convened the St. Petersburg Russia-Africa Summit, he still sent Dr. Alfred Mutua. In 2024, the head of state was given a red carpet treatment in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Washington. And now he's going to China. I mean, is his trade and approach smart of the global tendencies, or he is unable, or Kenya is unable to scrap hip Washington and its importance in the global system, the West, that it still perceives as so relevant?
Well, you know, in the play Hamlet, there's a line that says, there are more things to heaven and earth, O Horatio, than are perceived in your philosophy. And I think that the philosophy of a president who's a zoologist is something that has made this country fail in its foreign affairs in a very spectacular way. I think that Mr. Ruto, or President Ruto, has made not a strategic error, but he has made an error of the pessimism of the spirit. He has, from day one, taken his lot and thrown it to the West. And, you know, Henry Kissinger said that if it is very dangerous to be an American friend, but it is fatal to be an ally. Or is it the other way around? But it's fatal to be an ally. So I think that Mr. Ruto has made a very big mistake. And now he is going back to China, which is the major partner of Russia, to go and tell him that we are in trouble in Kenya and we need your help. He wants to reschedule the debt. He wants to get more money for legacy, because president is going to be a one-term president. He wants to see if he can, I don't know if that's what he's thinking. But my position is that I think that he is going there basically to get money, because he cannot run this government on how things are going today. The runaway corruption now is part of our situation. Nothing is working in this country. There's no system that's working. And the worst one is the play by the Butere girls, who are not allowed. You know, that's protected by our constitution, something that people have completely forget, that we have a constitution in this country that everybody struggle for. But on the issues of fiscal and economic policy, Ayub, I think that diplomacy is a very strong component of it. And once you fail on the diplomatic front, you fail on the financial front, and you fail on the thinking front, then, you know, you don't come home with much to say. So I think that we need to, the government needs to completely rethink how it is approaching the world, and it should start by dealing with East Africa. There is more importance in chicken coming from Tanga going to Turkana than toothbrushes being imported from Guangzhou. Because this whole concept of tariff is supposed to create an economy. A tariff is what protects an industry in your country so that it grows, and then you can go into the international market at a level playing field. That's what a tariff is. And the second thing about that is there is no country in the world that has not played economic nationalism. From Japan to China, everybody has played this card. Yeah. But you know, the thing that they've had a population in which they could buy and sell something. We're only 50 million. What we need is about 250 million people. And that's East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, actually, all this. And then these kids from Burundi who are selling tea here in town, that's a good thing. You know, they're going to build a shop next. We should not tax them. We should let them come here because their grandfathers came from the Congo forest. You fellows came from the South Sudan, the Nile. We were here 1,000 years before everybody else, including the Maasais. All this area was us. Now, what we need to do is just go back to history and say we have an East Africa, and we're going to have one currency, we're going to have one economy, and we're going to do these things in a way that is revolutionary. Okay. Because even in China, even though it was a communist state, there was an economic revolution. Yes. You cannot have capital working for you if you do not have a revolutionary situation economically in your country, even though the political party was a Stalinist one-party state.
And Churchill then, Kenya included, the continent accounts for 3% of the world's gross domestic product, and yet only attracts less than 1% of private capital. What could be the problems?
A number of issues, and I'm coming from a capital markets perspective, and we've seen these kind of issues time and again, whereby the continent is quite ignored when it comes to the private capital, and the financial services largely is not connected to the global arena. But one of the challenges is the savings culture. So this is something that primarily has now driven the kind of economies, the developed world economies. And also what we are seeing from the China is the huge population that they have, which has now internally also driven the consumption activities and also their growth in their economies. So Africa as a whole, if it unites, we can now pretty much replicate this kind of consumption that drove these other countries. And on the savings, pensions is still a nascent industry on the continent, and that is speaking to the disconnect in terms of the deep capital markets that we are seeing. And if we look at even what is played out, you find that in the context of the tariff wars, it's been confidence shock in the sense that people did not expect the extent of the tariff wars that has played out in the last 3 weeks. And it has just come and it has shocked the system. And what has now, the result of that, we saw that even the equities markets, they tanked the week of ending 4th of April. Last week, there was a bit of some reprieve, but still the equities, developed market equities, somewhat now came down lower. And because of that, you find that even the Eurobonds, African Eurobonds, the prices also went lower, or the yields, the yields went higher. So that means that even a potential African economy that will want now to go into the international markets, right now they have been closed out. We saw in the first quarter 7 countries going to the Eurobond markets, including Kenya with its liability management operation. Okay. But right now, with all that is ongoing right now, what is ongoing out right now, it's a bit difficult for any economy in the African continent to go out and issue a Eurobond, a dollar-denominated Eurobond, because of the financing conditions are quite adverse at this point in time. So that speaks even to internally, is our capital markets quite deep to be able to ensure that we don't rely on even the Eurobonds markets, but you can also look inward to be able to raise the necessary capital. But that now speaks to the savings, but even savings is an end result of economic growth, and also we need to grow even our exports such that the surplus can now remain internally, so that we can now be able to put it into the capital markets.
And Meshach, how does this happen? Because we talked about the continental free trade area that is across the continent. Ideally, we are having problems at the East African level here because of imports and exports into Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, at times the trade wars, and which snowballs into diplomatic standoffs. How can that then be practicalized, given the problems that do happen in the context, for example, of the East African community?
I think Africa needs to just find itself first, and then know itself, so that when we go to the table at the global level and try to discuss these things, we discuss from knowing who we are. Right now, it can easily be said that Africa is a bit confused. Maybe the hardware is China and the software is West, because probably for a long time after independence, most of our people, including our education, has been informed by the Western policies, and then China comes into place and does very tangible things here and there, and you realize that in reality, I owe China this much. And maybe in terms of policies, I am more aligned on the other side. So in that situation, it is very difficult. So Africa needs to first find itself and know who they are, and know what the generation of Africans now, the younger generation of Africans now need. And then at the East African level, like you're saying, what is still stopping us? My passport says East Africa Community. Why don't we just go ahead and make it real, such that the population of East Africa, including the DRC who joined a few years ago, would give us anything not less than 300 million in terms of population. If that 300 million if we were to capitalize in terms of business with that population, we are talking about rice, for example, from Mwea Ahero. And the ones we are producing is not even able to feed Kenya alone. So let alone the 300 million in the East African community. But you will still find each and every country in that East African community is still importing rice, bringing rice from Pakistan and other places. So if we were to capitalize on the things that we already have and the population that we have, probably we would already begin to make a big case when we go to international forum and start negotiating as Africa or East Africa.
Yeah, and Meg Whitman, the former American ambassador, pointed out here that because of inconsistencies in the taxation regime, it makes it difficult for investment. Plus, then, how can we fix the manufacturing problem, which is as a result of taxation regime and the cost of production? I mean, we are talking about job losses and layoffs that companies are embarking on because of the economic situation. Then when are we moving next to the level of an economy that is productivity-led and export-oriented to fix our food systems as well?
Now that will happen when we remove a lot of politics on maybe things like taxations, because every investor wants to know that if I put this much of money in this particular business, this is the kind of taxes that I will be paying. And by the time of 5 years or 10 years, this is what I am supposed to get out of it. But right now in Kenya, it's very difficult because you put this much, calculating everything and knowing this is the taxes that I'm supposed to pay. And then you wake up, you realize a lot has changed, and I don't even think at this point in time that we are supposed to do things like finance bill every year. I think it should be done, but not every year, so that we stabilize a little bit of our tax regime. So somebody can say, if I have 50 million only, this is the much I can put in terms of business. This is what is going to be expected for me in the next 5 years in terms of taxes. And so when I have sorted, because that will also encourage more people to pay taxes. Right now, what we are scratching our heads to do, even as members of the public,
yes,
is probably how to do business and how to avoid taxes.
Yeah.
So many people are still avoiding taxes at the same time.
Okay. Yes, Ahmed.
Ayub, the Donald Trump says that he has all the cards, and the Chinese president's reply is
Made in China.
Made in China.
Yeah.
So I think that the sick man of the world today is Africa.
Yes, yes.
And we need an Ataturk, someone in the same vein as the man who broke up the Turkish Empire and brought transformational modern changes to the continent, to his country, Turkey. Even though I don't agree with much that he did, but what I'm saying is that there has to be not a transformational person, but a transformational political elite who want to make drastic changes so that people can get jobs, they can build homes, they can take their kids to good schools, they can go to decent jobs. They can be something called a transformation. If the political class in this country does not understand that, there's going to be a revolution in this country. We nearly experienced one the other day by the Gen Zs. It's just part of the social relations. It's taught in this analysis school about history and the cyclical nature of history. The second thing is that we cannot continue just selling mandazis and bananas and selling coffee to London and sending roses to Amsterdam. That's not an economy. That is a colonial economy. And this colonial economy with our Standard Chartered banks, which is an extension of the other banks over there, makes us into a joke in what an economy is supposed to be. So the other door is open. Now, there's some people here at the Economic Council here, led by David Lee, who are selling us out to the landlords. They're looking at the economic philosophies from Hegel down to this Chicago school, a guy called Friedman. And they're using the same type of economic transformation that happened in Chile under Pinochet's dictatorship, in which they are going to bamboozle the very idea of Africa. Forget about even trying to bring East Africa together. This is exactly what disciplinary neoliberalism in the world wants. They want people like that Economic Council there to tell our president that what you need to do is to slash and burn the economy. Then you give the stock market people all the money. And when a child goes to healthcare to look for some tablet for malaria, they're told the stock market is more important, Mudaiga is more important. And this is neo-Darwinism. It is the way in which they want to burn the rest of the people and then have a few who can live a life of luxury. That will never happen. It will never happen because history has showed us that it will never happen. Now, our viewers should not be talked down to. I believe the Kenyan viewer is very educated, and they can tell the difference between a stock market making money and constructions here in Hurlingham and real jobs for the people. You see them working in South Sea all through the night building buildings from the corruption cartels who are stealing from devolution. They're being paid 500 shillings a day. What economic outback is that going to do for this man? Is he just going to buy food that's going to be perishable? Is he going to try and invest in building a house? Is he going to get proper booths to go to work? Our whole economic ideas and ways of doing things in this country is a flop because the people who are thinking about the economies have got this mental closure about neoliberalism, the stock market, the private sector. There's never been free trade in this world. There's never been, it's always been economic nationalism. That's why we have this battle for tariffs. And today, as our president goes to China, what we have to do is simply stop this borrowing. We have to stop borrowing.
All right.
And we have to find a way to live within our means. And we need to find a way to create East Africa so that you can have an economy to speak of.
And Churchill, then where is the point of course correction here? Because there is an original sin that prompted all these visits to either Bretton Woods institutions, what the CS John Buddy said. It's so embarrassing to be lining up, heading to China now by the president. I mean, had we made conscious financial decisions, we wouldn't be here, is it?
Yeah, sure. Before I go there, let me just a slight pushback on the stock market.
Yes,
I'm sure you're going to say that.
Yes. So, unlike our Kenyan politicians, they're not fixated in stock market. Vis-a-vis what we are seeing with Mr. Trump.
I understand.
So that's the reality here. Although there's some, stock market, it's quite devolved with the real sector, as you've correctly pointed out. But we really need, from a stock market perspective, and even the current administration, the IPOs, the initial public offerings, privatization, you do it now through the stock exchange, where people can also participate because you are now part of these companies. So just a slight rebut to that.
No problem.
But now looking at to your question, basically the Bretton Woods and all that. And it's quite interesting that this visit is coming at a point. Next week, there's the IMF and World Bank spring meetings. So it's quite coincidental. So I don't know what message is being telegraphed by the current administration that they are going to China at a time where this next week, the focus will be in Washington amidst the Bretton Woods system at these spring meetings. And also remember the context that we are in with the IMF. We had a program which came to an end early this month, but we're not able to finalize the last review because of some of the reviews that you are not able to somewhat complete. We call them, some of them, fiscal targets, whereby we were supposed to have raised X amount of monies by December. We fell short of that. And also the reforms that ideally we should have embarked on in the context of the conditions within by the IMF that you are not able to adhere to. So one way to look at it is that that our Kenyan authorities are not conforming to the conditions by the IMF, that they are not able to meet these conditions, or these conditions are too harsh that inevitably Kenya is not able to adhere to them. So whichever way you look at it, so that is the context that we are not able to go to finish that IMF program. And discussions is that there could be another IMF program.
But do you think the IMF is giving us, or should give us, the economic policies that we know more about in our own country? You know more about the economy of this country than the IMF. Is it important for us to understand that nobody can go work at a construction site without safety boots? And that's what the IMF is telling us, that they cannot wear safety boots. But it's telling the Europeans that you can borrow money at 1%. But it's telling us we can borrow at 15%. Yeah, it's like going to a Shylock. I'm sorry to use that word. So as we train our economists here, I'm a political economist. What is it that is so insane that we do not understand that these institutions have nothing to offer us whatsoever?
I think
that's just like what we have locally. When government is borrowing locally and individually you go to the same bank to borrow, you find it difficult because they now trust government more as a borrower than they would trust.
The government is absolutely irresponsible.
Africa is in that space. But I think we are not going to win as individual countries, this whole global economy. We are going to win as Africa and not as individual countries. Because Ayub, look at what we have right now. We have about 33 central banks which does not have a currency that can close a business just from Kenya to Addis.
Correct.
When you go to Addis, you have to invite a dollar, you have to invite a euro to close the business. So it is difficult for Ethiopia to win as Ethiopia, Kenya to win as Kenya. So we have to unite and have our currency, even as Africa, and say on the table, we can go to Botswana and close a deal. If I am a businessman, I can go down south and close a deal without inviting a euro into it or a dollar into it. But as long as we still keep the Kenyan shilling and Tanzanian shilling, which are all shillings, but
it's a joke,
does not meet anywhere until we bring a dollar to see. I mean, it doesn't work.
Yes, Churchill, please finish up.
Okay, so
sorry, Churchill.
Okay, on that, there's a ongoing Pan-African payment system.
Yes,
to resolve.
It's a brilliant idea.
It's a brilliant idea from Afrexim Bank to resolve that, because it didn't make sense if you're transacting from, say, you're in Kenya and you want to close a trade in Senegal, and then you go through dollar, euro. And then the
local
CFA
currency, the CFS.
So they're like two intermediary currencies, which have nothing to do with that particular trade. So that Pan-African payment system is quite handy. Now to the IMF question. I mean, it's one of those things that the current program that we entered in 2021, I mean, it was in the context of COVID-19, and then the fact that now we are not able to go to the capital markets. So, and if you look at it, in any IMF program, there is also the commitment that the Ministry of Finance, the central bank, they are adhering to do. So it's not entirely that it's wholly dictated by the IMF. There's also the bit of the authorities will do ABCD. So from that context, and that is now the context of the reviews every 6 months, that, okay, where are you? So yes, the IMF
Like you, Churchill, I've sat to these donors meetings. I worked for the government. And if you sit there, you will be appalled
I know.
at the kind of slavery that obtains in that negotiation. Every donor country stands up and says, we gave you $30 million yesterday for humanitarian aid, and your president ate the money. It's in the Swiss account. Here it is. You're sitting there and the foreign minister says, Mr. Ambassador, you know, we're doing our best in corruption. Then the next guy stands up and says, we gave you 100 million. It's in a Belgian account. And now you want more. Are you feeding the president? None of these presidents go to attend those meetings. And when they go to the main state-to-state, there's a form of decorum. But when they sit there, they will tell their counterpart, like Ruto is going to tell their counterpart, that China is an important partner for Africa. He's not going to say Kenya. I guarantee you will not say Kenya. And we need you to support us because of the international situation today, and we are ready to do this ABC. So what is that relationship? It is a relationship of dependency.
Okay. And Meshach, on the flip side, and what Donald Trump is more impressed is now he no longer fancies America as the global policeman that champions for morality, good values, democracy. NATO is no longer important to him. His argument is, why are we defending Europe? There's a conflict in Sudan. The RSF has announced another government in Sudan. It had its own forays here in Kenya. Our fair share of course, foreign policy mishaps here and there. Ideally, under these trade tariffs, should there be also a way to resolve conflicts across the continent without interest as such, which we were accused of as a country in meddling in the DRC, in Sudan, under the Uhuru Kenyatta government in Somalia, in Ethiopia? I mean, how can then the focus be away from the economics, the political stability of the continent? Yeah,
that's why I started, at some point I said, it is good for Africa to find itself, because right now, globally, you will find Russia-Africa Summit, India-Africa Summit, US-Africa Summit. Everybody has a summit for Africa except Africa themselves.
Absolutely.
Only Africa don't have their own summit meeting, where we lock ourselves and say, this is Africa for Africa.
Yes.
Before we go to Russia Summit, we as Africa have met and have agreed this is it for us. Nothing less, nothing more. Before we meet India and say Africa-India Summit when we are called, let us first find ourselves and say, Africa, this is it. This is the step one, this is the step two. Any country dealing with us have to follow this. So that is what I think we don't have right now. What we have is everybody having a plan for us except us. So India calls us and say, India-Africa Summit, and India has a plan, a whole plan, maybe for 30, 40 years. China has a plan. So we only get into other people's plans. So conflicts like the ones we are seeing, could be easily solved if Africa has a plan for themselves. But right now, even if you sample a population of young Africans out here and ask them, what do you think is the biggest plan for Africa in the next 10, 20 years? Probably you might not find any of them telling you clearly this is the plan for Africa. But because we also went to even live things like American dreams, we even know American dreams more than we know Kenyan dream or African dream. So that is what must change.
So Ahmed, can the opposite happen? For example, Nigeria-Europe summit, Nigeria-EU summit, where all the EU heads will come to Lagos or Abuja?
The great Amilcar Cabral, probably one of the most astonishing political leaders in this continent, once said that you should not tell no lies and claim no easy victory. What we are doing in this continent is claiming easy victories and telling a lot of lies to the people. And I think that political responsibility has to start at home. And of course, you know, now we have a broad-based government. A broad-based government is not a broad-based government, it's sleeping together. The parties of Mr. Odinga and Mr. Ruto are sleeping together. And the great reformist...
Maybe they are sitting together, not
no, they're
sleeping.
sleeping together. There's a difference. Sitting together is an entirely different thing. So I think that the great reformist of this country, probably the most brilliant politician of his generation, has gone into this broad-based government, and we thought that the first 2 times it was okay, but the third time it is a lie, and it's claiming an easy victory. And that shows you the character of our political leadership. You can see what is going on in Wajir. Ayub, your home county, and my home county as well, in which the governor of Wajir is being held by the scruff by an MCA who is trying to cause a situation in which the people of Wajir become embarrassed, and I become embarrassed, and you become embarrassed, and every Kenyan becomes embarrassed. Because every time a leader emerges from northern Kenya, who at least is trying to do something, we all know that there's corruption in all the counties. But Mr. Chir, who's the chairman of the Governor's Council and the governor of Wajir, should be given a break by these hoodlums. Hoodlums, they're really hoodlums who are just trying to throw mud at him. And if we don't have the political culture of trying to hold people to account through the legislature, account for governors through the system, account Mr. Chir through the parliament of Wajir, through popular sovereignty there, between town meetings, between our own culture where we have chiefs and not clan leaders, but chiefs from the community. The history of Wajir, you know, is from Mr. Ogley, one of the great patriots of this country, Chief Khalif. All the leaders who have come there, Wajir has had one of the great names in this country. And it is very sad to see this kind of monkey business going on there. And I'm just trying to tie that it is not only the responsibility of the West, it's not the responsibility of the IMF, it is not the responsibility of banks, it is the responsibility of us as Africans, as communities, to stand upright, to end corruption, to give leaders a chance to lead their communities, their nations, and we can bring prosperity. But the minute you get hoodlums in the position of power, you know, Mr. Muammar Gaddafi, the president of Libya, was shot in the head in a tunnel because he proposed a dinar for as an exchange. Yeah. And the French government just went after him. And NATO provided the air cover. That, I put it to you, that if you try to bring this change of currency, it is not a joke. Yeah. The whole world is watching, because what are you doing? You're taking resources away from Europe and the United States. Okay.
But Churchill, again, if you look at our own context, the context of Africa, there's always the lacking political consensus that which dovetails into our economic performance, which is largely dismal because of the instability and the fears of the investors withholding their money. Now there is the broad-based arrangement across the continent, more or less that's the reflection, it's the modus operandi. However, how is the lack of political consensus having an impact on our economy, for example? Or is political consensus in the context of Kenya now, where is the broad-based arrangement having an impact on our economic performance?
Oh, it's quite a nuanced question.
No, you should answer that question directly.
Okay. So if you look at it, the fact that our political system, we have the ruling party and then we have the opposition in place. So the role of the opposition is now to put the ruling party to provide the checks and balances for the ruling party. But as it is right now, so this is the second term that we are seeing that is not there. So we have one form of a handshake or a broad-based government also. So you find that you can't really draw the line between the opposition and the government. So in a way, and this is something that whenever we have discussions with some of the foreign investors, they find this is a peculiarity within the Kenyan context that
people are sleeping together.
You're saying the people are sleeping together. That this whole coming together between the opposition and the government. You've seen even across other jurisdictions, South Africa, they have their own, the government of national unity. That came even months earlier before our own broad-based government. Yeah. And you see that whenever there's cracks, if cracks start emerging, as it is the case within the South African case, and it boils down to the African National Congress being into a marriage of convenience with another left or one of the more advanced white denominated party, Democratic Alliance. But they had to come together because the ANC was not able to get that majority. So it lost its mandate. So they had to come with some coalitions. The fear was that it could go into some of the more radical parties, so to speak, the EFFs. So they had to strike a balance. But even within this whole balance, you need to have to accommodate all these other parties, and that's something that is playing out. So cracks might emerge. So right now, even within the context of the broad-based government, there is that cost of accommodating these other parties. So that is something that we might see even from the fiscal. There could be some budgetary reallocation to be able to entice the opposition to be able to 2027. You're looking at 2027 as the end game. So that is now the worry that has implications even on the fiscal as we look at this whole political consensus.
Is that a reason as to why we lose the focus? I mean, we had Kibaki left us with something manageable in 2013. Now look at where we are. It's 11 trillion Kenya shillings. It's leadership. I mean, Churchill, we had leaders in this country. And is focusing on the politics then making us have a hazy view of our economy, our goals, our vision, as Mesha pointed out? And when will the Kenyan politician and the African politician understand that to address the morally lacking question of serving the people and not the interests?
You see, even from 2003, Kenya hasn't had one dominant party. So there's one form of coalition or another, NAC in 2003, and then probably 2007, where
Grand Coalition
the GNU. But yes, GNU after the post-election violence. But even after that, there's been one form of coalitions after another. So that political cost of accommodating everyone, and at some point, the people who are excluded, one way or another, they find themselves into the government. So you can argue that that has been what has been dominant in the political discourse in the country, and also the cost towards that. So the political leadership, we can't say that there's been one, and also the ideology. We really don't have distinct ideologies in terms of politics in the Kenyan context. So you might have manifestos before elections, but then after that, I mean, people just resort to default setting because that's the consensus that pretty much plays out.
Yes, Mesha Kiada, please.
Yeah, that's where the hardware is new, but the software is telling you update. You just bought the phone and you're like, why am I updating a new phone? Because hardware is new, software was developed way, way back. So I think up to now, we probably as a country, even Ayub, at the very least, we even need to start auditing things like devolution and see whether it really works and whether it has met the objective so far after 10 or so years. What did we expect after this? Because if you didn't know where you were going, anywhere you found yourself, umefika. So I think that is the state where we are as a country. Only the leaders know where we are going, where they want to take us, but the common mwananchi and the people of Kenya generally do not know. So that's why anybody is able to sell anything politically, and we can buy. We are vulnerable. The people can buy anything. So much as you sit on the other side and you're saying the other person is not making sense, you also wonder how so many people believe in that other person and buys his ideas, even if they are not making sense. Right now, we have people who don't believe completely in this broad-based arrangement. Yeah. But then there are also millions of
like
Kenyans.
Ahmed.
Yeah, like Ahmed. But then there are also millions of Kenyans who are fully committed behind the broad base, and Ahmed will be wondering, what are you seeing in this thing? That is because as a country we don't have one vision, and so it is leaders who tells us where we are going. So anywhere we find ourselves, we are like, we are not lost because we were not going anywhere.
You remember?
So if we know where we are going, then we know at any particular time we are lost because we were not going to Machakos.
Yeah.
We were actually supposed to go to Nakuru.
Okay.
So Kibaki left us somewhere, and then the leadership after that took us a wrong turn. But because we didn't even know where we were going, we have no idea how far lost we are.
Okay.
So I think we need to come back as Kenyans and know when it comes to issues of economy, this is where we are going. When it comes to issues of leadership, political, this is where we are going.
See, nations don't think, they only feel.
Yeah.
So, you know, what they've done to us here in Kenya is they make you feel like a Luo. They make you feel like a Somali. They make you feel like a Kalenjin.
Yeah.
They don't want to make you feel like a Kenyan.
Like a Kenyan.
Not only a Kenyan, they don't want you to feel like an East African.
Or African.
The problem then there, because, you know, once the great Benedict Arnold said, what is a nation? They said, when they feel like it. That's when you become a nation. And I think that the problem of our political leadership as represented by Mr. Ruto, who went to Chatham House and said that the government was a mongrel government. This is when Mr. Odinga was with Mr. Uhuru. In the middle of London.
7th March 2022.
Yes, in the middle of London there. And he criticized that thing, and I was in such agreement with the fellow. And I said, and you know, Mr. Ruto is a great actor. He can put on a really good play. And you can believe him. Even Mr. Gachagua himself has admitted that Mr. Ruto can stand up and speak as well as I do. And I think that it's important for us to challenge that he said that this was a mongrel government, that it was the worst thing that ever happened to Kenya, and he was so passionate about it. I thought he was going to cry.
Yes.
Then just exactly a year later, he was saying such great things about
He has a bigger mongrel.
Yeah, this broad-based government is such an amazing thing. You know, now I have understood. You know, our politicians have to treat us with a bit of intelligence. Ayub, I put it to you. Because, you know, the internet never forgets. Now, you see, Mark Twain said, you know, if you don't tell a lie, you don't have to remember what you said. Yes. If you don't tell lies, you don't have to remember what you said. So I think that the people of this country can see. We know that we have our problems with feeling tribal, every one of us. Every one of us. But the thing about it is that this country called Kenya is where we all live. It is a mongrel itself, this country. They took some from Ethiopia, they took some from here, they took some from Somalia, from South Sudan, and they put us all together. But we don't have a choice, we have to live together. But what we must do is respect this constitution. This constitution is our way. It is our life. It is the way we are going to move forward. And if it is not respected, and if we continue in this path, then I put it to you that in the next coming election in 2027, we are going to have another 2007, 2008 in our hands. Because, you know, the president simply believes, for example, Mr. Kibaki, who was sworn in at night. You remember 2008?
Yeah.
You know, I was in the middle of that thing. What's stopping Mr. Ruto from saying you gave it to Mr. Kibaki, why don't you give me a second term? And he lost that election.
Yeah. But ideally now the contexts are different. You have to be sworn
That's exactly
in public.
The judiciary, judiciary that we have.
Yeah, isn't it then an issue that was addressed substantively by our constitution? Now you have to be sworn in between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. in public.
In public.
That's the president-elect.
Yes.
I mean, have we not sorted that problem through our Katiba now?
But if you bring the people to State House, you have sorted that problem out.
But how can that happen constitutionally?
Because the people who are holding the constitution are not following the constitution. If these people are not following the constitution now, what is stopping them from absconding from it tomorrow morning?
Because in the process, ideally, there should be the Chief Justice, the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary.
But who's going to go to court in the middle of a political crisis? They're going to say, we're going to put this together, put the police out and the army, and we're not going to accept this.
And what is the net effect?
We're in grave danger. Yeah. In my view, we're in grave danger. We must be able to have a clean election. If Mr. Ruto comes back and wins, he's the president of this country.
Abdi, I think for me where the problem is, we have the laws.
Ayub, not Abdi.
Sorry.
Still Abdi, no problem, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. It's my grandfather's name.
Oh, Abdi.
Yes.
I have a problem when we even go ahead and nullify an election like Maraga did, and after nullifying that election, up to now, nobody has carried that cross until today. So, yes, the Constitution is there. Yes, it has tried to sort out a few things. But who
implements it?
Takes the burden of not following that Constitution? Because if I have Supreme Court judges in 2017 saying this election was not conducted according to the law, but now we don't know up to now who deviated us away from the law. The IBC was there, Chebukati was there, and the whole team, but no one took the burden of deviating us out of the law. So it means even today we are looking for a new IBC chair and the commission. They can still deviate us out of the law and give us whatever they want, like Ahmed says, and nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen.
The worst that can happen is the Supreme Court saying, go back and do another election, and then they give us the same man back, and nothing happens again. So if nobody takes, we even have situations where we say money has been lost, but nobody takes the burden of anything. We go and we claim part of the same Constitution. Nobody is guilty until they are proven guilty. And then when you go to court to prove them guilty, you go again to the same Constitution, and the judges tell you, you got the evidence, you obtained evidence in a wrong way. So even the person who needs to be jailed knows very well this will be invoked. When they take this as evidence, we will say, how did they obtain that evidence to bring to court?
All right.
So we are just going round the same Constitution.
Okay, so let's sample the feedback and then I give you your final remarks here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. Engineer Lazaro says Trump's phobia should be a lesson to African nations to shift their focus from worshipping Western countries to fostering trade among themselves. Engaging in secret conflicts is a backward practice that has been overtaken by events. Bob Otieno Wino says the arrival of President Trump is both a blessing and a wake-up call for the African countries, especially Kenya, to chart a way forward that doesn't depend on America. Next is from Sir Nixon Dugure, who says we shall liberate our nation from Western colonization if we begin to truly respect ourselves, starting with the eradication of corruption, mismanagement of funds, looting, misplaced priorities, and the neglect of our rich mineral resources. Frank Orinde says after courting Western partners with promises of reform, this shift signals growing impatience with conditional aid. We are trading long-term sustainability for short-term infrastructure gains without rethinking the power dynamics that led us into this death trap in the first place. Bob again says Kenya and other African countries should emulate what many West African nations have done, relying less on the West and more on our resources. A good example is Burkina Faso. Ikangu says it's one thing to transform a country into a productive state, yet still import rice that's grown in Mwea. It's another when leaders with their Kasongonomics show no intention of building the nation's capacity for self-sufficiency.
Kasongonomics.
MC Kuruma says the problem we face in Kenya is budgeted corruption. We borrow more just to steal more. It's been alleged that 2 billion Kenya shillings is looted every day. If we seal all loopholes and manage our resources wisely, we could finance our budget locally in a more prudent and sustainable way. Yep. Churchill, your final comments.
The tariffs obviously has upended the world order. We've talked much about the downsides to the tariffs, but also there's some upsides, even for a country such as Kenya. One of them is now the oil prices because of the implications of the tariffs. So the expectation is that now the growth in the economy, global economy, will somewhat come lower. And because of that, you've seen that even the oil prices has come lower below around $60 per barrel from as high as of $75 per barrel 3 weeks ago. So that is beneficial. It's one thing that it has come down. It's another thing entirely that will reap the benefits from it. So, but it's something that is a wait and see to see if we actually can reap from it. And also it's an opportunity for Kenya to diversify, even look elsewhere, at least to be able to absorb the shock that has happened. No, the implication is slightly lower. The governor spoke to around $100 million, which will be lost in terms of the trade between Kenya and the US. But I think that's something that can be absorbed elsewhere.
Okay. Yes, Meshach.
Thank you. My last word would be simple. All this we're discussing here was still supposed to be falling on the doorstep of Parliament at a certain level because they are supposed to do oversight. So when we talk about borrowing, when we talk about mismanagement, when we talk about projects, we had beautiful things like Galana Kulalu, which was supposed to feed us as a country and save us from importing maize and things like that. Today, we would not be talking about things like this if we know for sure when it comes to grains, for example, maize, we are feeding ourselves as a country and we can even feed our neighbors. We would be talking about less of this. But Parliament has not done their role, which is oversight. Until today, very few Kenyans even know what happened to Galana Kulalu. And even the member of parliament that are around that area still don't speak about it.
By the way, the Israeli ambassador whose country was given that contract had requested the Prime Minister to recall him back to Tel Aviv because he felt frustrated because of kickbacks from government
problems.
Officials.
Yes. Yeah, they wanted corruption. They wanted money. See, the challenge of modernity is to live without illusions. And Africa has got to start waking up to the fact that modernity is forcing itself, and that is Western capitalism, on their countries, their nations, and their well-being, and that it knows no empathy. It is a form of barbarism, and we have to create prosperity to take care of ourselves in this continent, in this region. And we can only do that when we get the political leadership that we deserve. And I want to tell Kenyans that every time the people of this country, they are called upon to stand up, is another time for us to stand up and protect our civil and political rights, our constitution, so that we cannot have another tyrant coming into our country and telling us what to do, when to do it, and how to do it.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Ahmed Hashi, diplomatic and governance commentator, Churchill Ogutu, economist with the IC Group, and Meshach Odede, international affairs commentator. Many thanks for your time. Much appreciated.
What a delightful show.
And thanks to you too, as ever, for watching the broadcast and waking up with us here on Daybreak, for your feedback and for your company throughout the broadcast. Up next is Health and Lifestyle with Safin Achieng Oma. Thanks for watching. Good morning.